I'm really excited to share a bit more about what we've been doing at Accenture with Bombora. So thanks to the Bombora team for the opportunity. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit more about Accenture. For those of you, many of you might be aware, but Accenture is a leading global professional services organization. We have just under 740,000 employees, serving about 9,000 clients globally. And we really help businesses, organizations, governments build their digital core, transform their operations, and ultimately accelerate their growth. We're uniquely positioned to be able to do that because we've got really deep industry expertise, really deep functional expertise. In addition, we have solid delivery capabilities that allow us to innovate and deliver really comprehensive solutions for our clients. Before we go ahead, let me tell you a little bit about me and my team and where we all started, and then I'm going to get into our journey with Bombora. So I joined Accenture about 6 years ago. It's been a wild ride, but time flies when you're having fun, right? It feels like it's been a blink of an eye. And when I first joined Accenture, I joined in a web strategy role where I was focused on redesigning their website, handling their digital analytics. But at that time, we had a new CMO join, and she was focused on transforming the organization. And with that, born a group called Intelligence Services. And that's where my group sits. So I oversee data and analytics here at Accenture for their marketing and communications department and corporate functions. And my team was developed about 4 years ago. So they asked me, hey, can you lead this team? And we've ultimately spent the last 4 years building the function from the ground up. So prior to that, we had, of course, a lot of analytics, a lot of teams using analytics in many different ways, whether they were industry marketers, service marketers, whether they were focused on specific geographic areas. All using similar tools, but didn't necessarily have the same consistency in terms of how they were using measurement, different measurement frameworks. And in addition, we saw a lot of opportunity to maybe fill some gaps in terms of some of our analytics capabilities. Some of that was on the digital side, like revamping our Adobe implementation, doing UX measurement, and in other cases, we were bringing on totally new capabilities. So how did we get to Bombora? We had a big focus on our client experience. And again, we had many teams working with clients in many different ways, right? Industries, services, markets. And we really knew that we had to focus on better client insights so that we could inform our go-to-market, deliver relevant client experiences, and ultimately drive growth for the business. And as many others before me shared, we had a lot of great data. We had a lot of great first-party data. How are clients engaging with us over email? How are they engaging with our website content? What events were they attending, right? But we knew there was a lot that we didn't know. And we knew that that first-party data could potentially be skewed by, it's really what we're pushing out, right? So of course, we're going to see some engagement with what we're pushing to clients, but what were we missing? What didn't we know about our clients? And that's when we said, okay, we really need to supplement our first-party data with intent data. Now, at that time, and I'll take a further step back, I was new to the B2B space when I had joined Accenture. Prior to this, I was at media companies like NBC and Time Inc. So we really had to figure out where do we begin. And we went through a really lengthy process. I shouldn't say so lengthy, a few months long, where we really assessed the landscape. So did a lot of research to identify who the players were. At this time, we were also looking not just at intent data, but companies that could help us supplement our firmographic data as well to make sure we had the most up-to-date data in our CRM. So we looked at a wealth of providers, some that provided both types of capabilities, some that specialized in just one. From there, we did RFI and an RFP process, 11 down to 5 or 6. And then ultimately, we had 2 vendors that we had finalized, and we went through a hands-on evaluation. We really wanted to make sure that we kicked the tires to make sure it could meet our fit-for-purpose needs before we finalized our selection. And we looked at a number of different types of things as we assessed the providers. First was market coverage. When I say market coverage, I'm talking both globally as well as in terms of our services. So I mentioned we provide services everything from strategy and consulting to technology to operations to media, right? We do it all for our clients. So we needed to make sure that we were working with providers that had a really robust taxonomy, and Bombora did have that. In addition, we wanted to make sure that we had really strong market coverage as well. We also looked at the usability, right? So we wanted to make sure that no matter what vendor we went with, we really had the ability to customize the views of the data, really work with it in the way that we needed to fit our needs. So as we had started to build our data foundation and other capabilities for marketing communications, we built a lot of global tools where we could build global solutions, and then depending on where you sit within marketing, you had the ability to filter those views to meet your custom needs. And we wanted to make sure we had a provider that would allow us to really work with the data in that way. Data collection, we already touched on, right? The exciting space of data privacy, GDPR, CCPA, we had to make sure that our provider was going to be really buttoned up in terms of their data privacy practices. And then on the data science side, we made sure that our team got together with the vendors to really talk through what their approach was, really assess the approach, and just make sure that we really understood the models that were behind the data. And then we had about a 60-day pilot with two vendors in particular. And this is where I think it was Franklin that mentioned it earlier. We made sure we had a really cross-functional group participating in that pilot. And when I say cross-functional at this point, for my team, our primary clients were the marketers. We weren't yet working direct with sales. And my team, as I mentioned, was also pretty new, right? So we needed to first establish what we were doing with our marketing teams. And then you'll hear in our journey how we went further with our sales teams and our account teams. So the participants in the trial were, of course, folks from my team, data and analytics. We had some really specific account-based marketers, folks that were assigned to specific accounts. We also had our global industry marketers, because again, when we look at this data, I'll talk more about it later, it's not just about specific account insights, but what could we do more broadly? And then we also had brand and content strategy as well. And then we kicked the tires on a number of different use cases. We actually started with a taxonomy, I think, of over 700 topics for this pilot. So we because of how broad our services are, we pulled together a taxonomy of about 700 topics. We looked at it through a number of different lenses, account-based insights, what we call our big bets or focus areas. Every year, we're tackling specific services in a different way, beyond the breadth and depth that we have. And then on the data science side, as I mentioned, we assessed the models, but then we also did some testing on the predictive power of the data as well. And ultimately, we chose Bombora, and I think all of you in the room likely know why, right? But Bombora really partnered with us right from the beginning, was able to give us that access to the data, really enable us to kick the tires, and they really met our needs. Broad taxonomy, ability to truly customize our views, and then also the ability to take the data and integrate it into our system so that we could be where our users are. And so this is the start of our journey, and I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking you through a few of our use cases. And ultimately, we've been working with Bombora now, I'd say, for about 3+ years, and we've been chipping away at this. And you're going to hear probably some similarities between our journey and some of the prior speakers. But first, I'm going to talk a bit about the account insights and sort of the specific insights we use for our account intelligence. Then I'm going to talk, I think this is something new for the day at least, more about some of the macro insights that we generate, and then how we did more and more integration with the data, first to enable even more sales engagement, and then advanced data integration and use cases, which I'm really excited. We're getting to all the fun stuff right now. So with account-based insights, we started small and we started light here, just as many said. We didn't try to boil the ocean. We were Excel-based, so I was a hand raiser earlier, as we all did. And we had our data and analytics team, we had folks assigned to specific account-based marketers. And we actually, in this case, first started to hand curate reports for them. We actually delivered to them weekly saying, hey, here's what we're seeing in terms of intent for your accounts. They knew the accounts in and out, right? So they knew maybe what might have been relevant, what wasn't. And then they would then take that to the client account leads for further feedback, et cetera. Before we get to that part, I'm going one step backwards. Building marketer understanding. So we did a lot of work to make sure the marketers could understand some things about the methodology, but also trying to keep it simple. You know, we explained the benefits, and that's what we really led with, right? So when we talked about the data, we said, this is how you could use the data. We didn't start with the methodology, we started with how it could help them. And then we did go a bit deeper in two ways. One, not just to emphasize how it could help them, but two, to get ahead of some of the questions. So being open and honest, right? Marketers always want to know, well, how do I know these are the right people researching these topics? You know, is this really valid or not? So we called out the caveats with the data too. We said, you know what, you don't know, but that's because it's data privacy compliant, right? You don't know who the who is, right? But it's data privacy compliant. And in addition, you have to be careful because some of the data can be skewed by the news cycle, right? So the way we position the data has always been a tool in the toolkit. And that's how we always positioned it. And similar, I think it was Franklin also earlier that said, without it, right, you don't have this line of sight at all. But with it, you're opening up a whole new world of opportunities. So we did spend a lot of time building that marketer understanding. And as I get later in the presentation, I'll show you also what we did with some of the visualization and the calculated metrics that we developed, just to make sure that they had the right context when they were looking at the data as well. So from there, client account lead engagement and feedback, we saw immediate positive feedback. Not from every account, but that was because I think some marketers, right, were more hesitant with the data. Some marketers leaned in right away, as we'd see throughout the organization. But right away, the great thing was we saw account teams be able to say, you know what, I never really thought about bringing this service to this client, and it immediately started to open up opportunities. That enabled us to create that feedback loop, right? And then really inspire others to adopt. So once other marketers said, oh, wow, you're able to generate new opportunities, right, for your account, they want to then do it. And then we're further building that adoption. So now we've got the self-serve visualization. So we built a Power BI dashboard where we took the data, the Bombora data, and we mapped that data to our specific CRM, our database. And we basically said, and it was quite complex, and we had to do a decent amount of heavy lifting at the time. We have large enterprise accounts. Some of these accounts have multiple domains, right, to a single account name. So we had to do a good amount of work to make sure we were mapping the domains to the right account names. In addition, in our CRM, I'm sure like many of you, we know, okay, which industry does the account belong to, which market unit. And just like all of the other data and analytics tools that we develop, you could see down here on the left, you have the ability to go in. It's a single solution, but regardless of which industry, which service, which market you're servicing, maybe which service you're focused on, you have the ability to filter and customize the views. And then this view here, I won't get into details, but imagine you could come to a dashboard. Let's say you're focused on a specific account. You could filter by that account name, and then you could just quickly see, easy view, which are the clusters that are surging, which are the topics underneath. I can't remember if a cluster is a unique term for us or if that's a common Bombora nomenclature. Thank you. Okay, so you could actually see those click downs. You could see the difference week to week in which topics and clusters were surging, as well as which topics and clusters are moving the most. And then we had a number of other different views in the dashboard as well. I really love the bubble charts that we've created. In this case, we're looking by industry, right? So let's say we're focused on a specific service. We have to drive more business in cloud, right? And we want to say, okay, well, where should we really focus? Now, some of our folks will always be focused at the account level, and there's views for that. But in other cases, you know, we might want to talk to certain industry teams and say which industries might really want to focus on this service. And so the visualization that we have here is the volume of surges in the x-axis, as well as the average score on the Y, and then we could say, okay, if you're up and to the right, you know what I mean? Maybe that should be the handful of industries, that we focus on for this specific service. And then when I was talking earlier about the context that we wanted to provide to marketers, now, in some cases, right, banking might have more accounts, than maybe another industry. So we always have number of unique accounts that we're showing there, as well as percent of account coverage. So what percent of those accounts are actually surging in that topic? So again, that makes sure that we're making the right decisions, right? Because banking could be skewed if there's more accounts there. And then we also had, for the topic specifically, if this was a cluster view per se, and you saw which clusters were surging more than others, you want to know, well, maybe that cluster has more topics, right? So let's get that context, and let's also understand how many topics within that cluster are actually surging. I'm going to talk to you a little, actually, I'm going to do this now. Lessons learned, right? So one thing was, we almost went a little too complex with this to start with the dashboard. So it's the marketers that receive the Excel files, simple views, easier to digest. We, our data and analytics folks, we get really excited about this. This might be too much for a marketer, right, to begin. So lesson learned, this looks great for us, but simple views definitely work, and particularly in the beginning. And this is actually, I think, similar to one of the views you saw earlier as well in a different presentation. But this actually shows us for a specific cluster. In this case, we're looking at cloud. Which topics, what are the top 10 topics over whichever time frame you chose, and how are they trending over time? And again, if this is for, this is overall, let's say, but we could filter that for a specific account and say, okay, what's happening? So this account surging on cloud, what topics within it? Is it cloud management? Is it cloud security, right? And really understand what to tailor. And then this is a great story with the news cycle, as I mentioned. In this case, Microsoft Azure, was surging. They had an outage. So that was actually driving that. But again, making sure that you're using the data in the right way. So before I get to the next slide, let me tee it up first. I'm going to move into the macro insights that we develop with the data. So when I say macro insights, moving from account-based intelligence to more broader views around specific services. So let's say we have a big push. I'm going to use cloud again. I always go to it. I don't know why. AI could be another one. We use a lot of different data tools, as I'm sure many of you all do, to just understand what's happening in the market around that specific service. So we use things like social listening, news media listening, search insights, and now adding Bombora. What we developed were like packets for our marketers or leads across specific services. We would call them insights to inform packets, right? And we would look at listening data that allowed us to understand what's the conversation happening around this topic, what are our competitors saying, and what's the momentum that our competitors have around that topic, where are we ranking in search, and then Bombora allowed us to add where's the client interest, right? So we had a really great cross-functional team effort, or we do have, I shouldn't say had, a great cross-functional team effort where we did a couple of things. Keywords are really important, as many of us know, for these listening tools. So we made sure that we had a similar taxonomy across these tools so that social wasn't looking at AI differently than maybe we are in Bombora. And then we pulled together these packets of insights, and we really looked for trends that we could see across these insights. So what I'll share with you on these slides here are just some of the views from the Bombora data that's in here. I'm excluding social search, et cetera, because it's not relevant for today. But I'll just talk you through some of the views that we had here. So pretend like this is a specific topic on the right, and then we have all clusters, and I shouldn't say topic, it's a cluster in this case, because these are the big areas that we're focused on. In these reports, we'd have views. Are we seeing more activity, around this cluster than we are overall, for our specific clusters? We also looked at the topic interest level over time. In some cases for our clusters, we even developed subclusters within because our topics are so broad. So then within these reports, we'd be able to say, okay, not just what are the top 10 topics or whatever it might be for a certain period of time, but how are the trends shifting over time? And in this case, this looks at the top 10 topics in easier view. of how those trends are moving. And then in this bottom right here, what we're seeing is along the x-axis is the number of surges that we saw for topics within that cluster. And then on the y-axis is the number of domains researching. So again, these are really broad topics, cloud, AI, et cetera. So when we think about where do we want to focus, we could say, okay, at this point in time, we're seeing a lot of activity, right, around cloud integration, cloud-based analytics, cloud security, and it could help our marketers really form their content strategy by leveraging this insight in this way. And then, as I mentioned, you all know we have the ability to pivot this further or drill down further. So it was a really nice ad. We really try to think about, as we all know, right, there's performance measurement and then there's insights to inform. So any new tool that we could get, like Bombora, that's as robust as Bombora, really adds value to what we are seeing and what we could use to make our decisions. Okay, so now we're at a point, we've got a good amount of marketing engagement. Those marketers were responsible to going to sales, right, to bring the account teams that data, and we had a good amount of traction there, a good amount of use cases. And now we were at a point we wanted to integrate further. We wanted to further democratize the data so that we could get even more adoption. So in this case, we did focus on our Salesforce integration with Bombora. And we hoped that this would turn out as it did, which would be ultimately to drive adoption, and it really did. We have a massive organization, as I said, so we could do what we can, right? And you could do as many sessions as you can, but you really need to put the data where the users are to really drive that adoption. So in this case, we did a CRM integration, and when you go to an account in Salesforce, like I'm sure for us, like for many of you, there's a lot of data that's already in there, our account plan data, our opportunity data. We had a really simple tile on the account page that would allow them to see just the top topics for the week. So again, really, really simple. And then you had the ability to click in that to just see another really simple table report in Salesforce that gave you a little bit more context regarding the cluster that it's in, the amount of topics in the cluster, and a little bit more detail. And then the benefits of that, right? You get the most recent week of data. We're driving even more awareness for that Bombora data. And then we were a beta partner launch for that latest version of that Salesforce integration. That was meant to drive awareness for our overall dashboard, which, as many of you saw already, that had the more robust data, the historical trends, even more calculated metrics, the ability to truly customize the views, go further, say, okay, well, I'm seeing this topic here. What if I want to look at that cluster overall, right? You had the ability to go further that way and drill in. We saw a lot of really good adoption here. So at this point, sales teams jumped on this, or the account teams jumped on this. And then they started to reach out to us saying, we wanted to learn more about the Bombora data. And when they came to us, they started creating their own decks to share Bombora with their teams and to start talking about the benefits of Bombora. So, it was phenomenal. So I saw a deck where they literally listed out the benefits, talked to clients earlier in their buying process, right? It allowed them to do that. Identify which topics and increase their relevancy, for their accounts. Help them truly originate deals before the buying committees made their decisions, and then increase their competitiveness and win rates. And a few examples, our health and public service practice in particular really jumped into this. And they gave a couple of great examples. I think the first one was around call center frustration. They saw topics around call center, conversational AI, et cetera. And it was an area that the teams weren't talking to that customer about, and it allowed them to originate deals. Another example was in the security space, seeing a ton of activity around data security breaches, et cetera. And it really helped them open up a conversation with a CISO just to further expand the scope of a project that they were talking about. So this integration, like I said, and it was really simple, just showing top topics and being where the users are, it's really driven a lot of nice further adoption for us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some advanced use cases now. So now we are at a point where We've got the sales engagement, et cetera. And now we wanted to bring the Bombora data together even more closely with other data sets. So the other examples I've shared already, we had our separate Bombora dashboard, we had our macro insights where we brought things together, but it wasn't from a technical integration standpoint. And then what we did here was really interesting. This is a view, and I know, don't try to read the chart. It combines 3 key data sources for us. It combines our opportunity pipeline data, it combines intent data, and then it also looks at marketing engagement data. And true to fashion, just like all of our other dashboards, you have the ability to go in and filter this for your specific view, industry, market, any combination, account domain, you name it. And then on the x-axis here, we're seeing total qualified pipeline. And on the y-axis here, we're seeing surge rate. So if you think about how you'd use this, and again, if filters were applied, you would see a much simpler view here, and nobody's looking at this in this view. But if you saw, let's say, an account on the left here, let's just say, we're seeing a lot of surges. Oh, the size of the bubble is the marketing engagement rate. The colors of the bubble is the cluster that's relevant. I left those 2 key points out. So let's say you've got an account here, not a lot of pipeline, a lot of marketing engagement, and a lot of surges, meaning there's a lot of topics surging, for that cluster. Sales team says, why aren't we originating deals, right, in that space? So it's a really quick decision maker for them and a really quick heat map, right, where they could look at all 3 data sources at once without having to do that work. And then let's say you see an account here that's got a lot of pipeline, tiny circle. What are we doing in marketing? Why don't we see more marketing engagement around that? Why aren't we helping that pipeline along, right? So again, this is a really, I think, nice, easy visual way for folks to make decisions based on this combination of data. And then we're on our last use case here. This is where we're going now. So we're actively working on this, and I'm really, really, really excited about this. We've got, maybe we're following in Franklin's footsteps with the crystal ball. But we've got a lot of different data, and to date we've been really effectively using our marketing data. And within our CRM, as I mentioned, we have both structured and unstructured data. So opportunity data that we could work with, but there's a lot of really rich data in the account plans, et cetera. We also have our web engagement data where we've got things tagged, but more manually, but we really needed to figure out a way to get better topic-based insights, from that. So we've been undergoing an effort as part of course, the data foundation I mentioned, right? We've been bringing all of our data into our data lake, as many as you have, and we've made a ton of progress there. Now we're doing even more work, right, on top of that data to join it together. We're applying NLP and actually now generative AI or ChatGPT, right, to really get more value out of that unstructured data, and then ultimately using that to build a number of different use cases with that. So client contact insights, right? So who is this audience, right? What do we know about them? The topic tagging, which topics are resonating for those segments of audiences. So we're going to be doing all of this at more of that audience segment level. So if we want to go after CMOs in banking, right? What topics are they engaging with, both across both our first party and our third party data? As well as where are they from an opportunity standpoint, right? Have they bought from us before? Where are they in that sales cycle? And then ultimately use that to understand buying stage, right? So then if we could say, okay, we've seen some engagement here, maybe they haven't bought yet, they might be more in the awareness stage. Let's hit them with these marketing channels or these tactics. Maybe there is an opportunity in the pipeline already, right, for a specific service. We're seeing more intent. Let's hit them with some more targeted outreach. So that's where we're going. We're in the stage right now where we've brought a lot of our data together. We've building our single view of the customer, but this topic-based insights is where we're going next. The Bombora data is easier to work with. It's nice and structured, but we're putting a lot of effort into a lot of our unstructured data so that we could bring that all together. So the stages of our journey. So this is just a recap, right? So assess the landscape. Where have we been? Let's make sure we're piloting the vendors, making sure we're really kicking the tires. And then ultimately just chipping away at the progress over the past few years, account-based insights, robust visualization, macro insights, CRM integration to further democratize once we were further together. And then now the fun's really starting with our advanced analytics and AI use cases. And just a little bit around lessons learned. The pilot, I think, was really helpful. It really proved out, I think, why we chose the vendor that we did. There's a lot of vendors out there in the space, but you really need to choose a vendor that's going to meet your own unique needs. And that ability for us to really get our hands on, work with the data, and use it for many, many different parts of the organization was really helpful. In addition, having those partners as part of that process, that pilot process, helped us start off with ambassadors to help inspire the usage. I touched on this one already. I jumped the gun. So simplify the complex. So what we found, right, just keeping it simple. We could help you understand topics of interest. You could be more relevant. You could bring the right content, right? Keep the data simple, then go further and make sure they're using the data in the right way through the calculated metrics, through the other explanations. I think that's why that MMS integration, it was so easy for the sales teams to wrap their heads around and really, like I said, on their own, jump in with 2 feet without being nervous with oh my God, there's a lot of data in that dashboard. What do I do? Democratize the data, so be where the users are. And an organization of our size, we have no choice. We can't be everywhere. So just make sure we're there, and then continuously innovate. So as I mentioned, we have a little ways to go with our new use cases, but I can't wait to see what we're going to do next and see what other use case we come up with the data. And that is it, I think. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just ask one follow-up. Laura, during this whole process, was there one, oops, that didn't work, lesson that you had? And, no is okay, but.
I think honestly, it's what I said about the dashboards and the intimidation. I think there are some people that were comfortable, that were able to jump in. I think making sure that we were truly simplifying, I think that was a good learning. And I think we might have seen more rapid adoption from marketing sooner if we kept it just that simple. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.